Yes! I am invincible!
Hello again, Exiles. In my last video, I had an overwhelming amount of people ask me about my build, so I figured it's time to put a guide together. I want to give a shout out to Cat Kills because they are the creator I originally got this build from, so I'll leave a link in the description to their channel if you want to check them out. Now, without further ado, let's get started. The Hexblast Infernalist is a low-life, high-energy shield build where you are constantly balancing your health bar as a resource to fuel your Demon Flame. The more Demon Flame stacks you get, the more damage you deal, but the harder your form is to maintain. If you like snapping things out of existence and don't mind a bit of ramp-up time, then this build is definitely for you. Let's talk about the pros and the cons of the build. The pros are very high AoE damage, good survivability, insane mobility. It's a 1 to 2 button build, and it's very easy to cap your chaos resistance. Now the cons of the build are you have to pay attention to your health. It can be challenging to cap your resistances due to equipping 3 uniques. It requires some ramping up, super mana hungry, and it can't one-shot bosses. Okay, let's talk about the gear first, because it is a massive part of why this build works. There are 2 very important uniques that we need for this build to function. The first is Ghost Writhe Tattered Robe, because it replaces 50% of our life with Energy Shield. The second is 2 Ming's Heart Rings, because they also reduce our life pool and give us a large amount of extra chaos damage. Additionally, you can use flesh catalysts from Breach on these rings to reduce our life even more. We want to reduce our life as much as possible because of how the Demon Flame stacks work. I'll talk more on this later in the Ascendancy section. Now, it's not important starting out with this build, but as you build your currency, you will want to either take a chance and corrupt these uniques yourself with Vol Orbs, or buy corrupted versions that reduce our maximum life even more. Now, for the rest of the gear, there are 2 mods that we need to stay away from as they increase our life. We don't want that to happen. Those mods being plus maximum life and plus strength. Do not get any gear with either of these 2 stats. Alright, so what modifiers do we want on our gear? Life regen, where we can get it, is mandatory. Capping out our resistances at 75% is mandatory. Everything else I will list in order of importance per equipment piece. If you have a hard time looking items up on the trade website, then check out my max roll guide where I have links that will take you to a budget version of each equipment piece. I'm going to assume that if you're looking for a non-budget version, then you probably know how to use the trade website. Alright, on our helmet, we want life regen, resistances, energy shield, mana. On the amulet, we want life regen, plus spirit, plus level of all spell skills, or plus cast speed. Be careful with spell skill levels because while it increases your damage by quite a bit, it also increases your mana costs. Resistances, energy shield, mana. Also on your amulet, you will want to anoint Resilient Soul using the distilled delirium currencies that you can farm from either delirium or buy them off the currency exchange. It takes 2 distilled envies and 1 distilled guilt. Now on our gloves, this is the best piece to go absolutely crazy on resistances. So I recommend aiming for 3 resistance mods here: energy shield and mana. On the belt, we want life regen, resistances, and mana. And finally, on the boots, we want movement speed, life regen, resistances, energy shield, and mana. Okay, now let's move on and talk about our Ascendancy tree. For our Ascendancy, we are choosing the Infernalist. This is what gives us access to Demon Form, the most important mechanic of our build. Demon Form grants us the following buffs while we maintain our shapeshift. 25% increased cast speed, plus 6 to level of all spell skills. We deal 18% increased spell damage per Demon Flame stack. And the downside is we lose 0.5% of life per second per Demon Flame stack. This is why keeping our life as low as possible is so important. Because it is a percent of our life we lose per second, scaling more life will not improve our survivability at all. It will only reduce the effectiveness of our life regeneration because that is a flat number and not a percent. We should be aiming at a goal of 200 max life and 200 life regeneration per second. Also, I will mention that while in Demon Form, we lose access to any equipped weapons and the stats that they provide. And that is why in the gearing section, you probably noticed we don't actually equip any weapons with this build. After finishing our second Ascendancy, we'll grab the Loyal Hellhound. This is basically just an additional defensive layer. The Hellhound will absorb 20% of the damage we take, and because of that, all the support gems we apply to the Hellhound will be to make it tankier. I'll talk more about that in the gem section. After our third Ascendancy, we'll be picking up Altered Flesh. This notable makes it so we apply our resistances to the damage we are taking twice. An example with easy numbers would be, say we get hit for 1,000 lightning damage, and we have 75% lightning and fire resistance. Our 75% lightning resistance would make us only take 250 damage. Then Altered Flesh would apply our 75% fire res to 20% of the 250 damage we were about to take, making us only take 62.5 lightning damage. And finally, for our fourth Ascendancy, this may feel weird, but we don't go for any of the other large notables, as none of them are useful to us. And instead, we pick up two of the smaller points, one for 12% increased spell damage, and one for 4% increased maximum mana. Next, let's talk about our passive tree. In our passive tree, we're looking for a few main things. The two most important are Energy Shield and Mana Regeneration. After that, we're looking for things like cast speed, area of effect, utility in the form of anti-stun and anti-freeze, notables that increase the effectiveness of our curse and wither, and finally, jewel sockets. Jewels are incredibly important for this build to function properly, and the only modifier you need on them is percent increase life regeneration rate. I'm going to go ahead and go through my tree right now, but if you're planning on going this build, definitely check out my max roll build guide so you can see the tree in its entirety zoomed out. All right, let's take a look at our passive tree. Starting at the start here, we're going to take everything. This is all mana regen and max energy shield. That's great. Pure energy. This is max energy shield. That's great. Open mind, mana regen, practice signs, cast speed, dampening shield, max energy shield, and also max energy shield is additional stun threshold, which is important. Mana blessing, max mana. Come up here, over to the side. Melding, increase max energy shield. Insightfulness, increase max energy shield, mana regen, increase intelligence. Keep going. Zone of control, increase area of effect of curses. This is going to help our blasphemy reach further with our curse so that we can hexblast things that are further away from us. Then aestheticism, stun threshold, based on 30% of our energy shield. This is super important because we have low life, so we need to pick up some nodes that are going to give us some stun threshold. And then we go back to where we branched off here. Arcane Blossom, 15% increased mana recovery rate. Huge. We got another branch here. We'll go up top first. Over to here. Patient Barrier, increase max energy shield. This is a huge percent increase. This is a really big node. Ether flow, increase mana regeneration rate while moving. We are always moving, so you're only going to get the plus side of this. You're never going to be stationary, so this is only a plus, and 50% is huge. Going. Mental alacrity, increase cast speed, increase mana regen, intelligence. It's great. Going. Wither away. This is going to wither things without needing to use the Eye of Winter, but also when you do use Eye of Winter, you have a 20% increase effect of withered. So this is going to really help you shred bosses and like particularly difficult rares when you're starting out. Let me keep going down here. This one is super important. Icebreaker. This will gain 100% of max energy shield as additional freeze threshold. This is so incredibly important. If you're getting frozen a lot, it's probably because you don't have this yet. This is a huge notable. I would not skip this. It makes it so you don't need to run a freeze charm, and you can instead just keep a stun charm on permanently. This is awesome. It makes breaches feel amazing. This one's great. And then we pick up the jewel slot here. We want as many jewel slots as we can get. And we'll go back to where we branched off at. Right over here. Jewel. This circle right here is all energy shield. This is just huge energy shield buffs here. This one's really great too because it reduces our maximum life even further. Heavy buffer. It's great. Illuminated crown. If you have a really good helmet, you'll get an even better benefit from this. Light radius is a meme. Keep going. This node up here is huge. Touch the arcane. 40% increase effective arcane surge. Arcane Surge is on our Hexblast, and it's just going to give you more cast speed and more mana regeneration rate. This is huge. Okay, keep going. More energy shield here. Calibration, 30% increase energy shield, 4% increase max mana. It's great. Then another jewel, and then this stuff right here. This is all area of effect. This is going to help our blasphemy reach things further, so we can Hexblast further away from us. It's also going to make our Hexblast bigger as well, which is great. We don't take this big notable here because it doesn't really, the increased spell damage, we don't really notice it that much because we already have so much increased spell damage. And then also the knockback, it's kind of a meme. And then kind of the end of the tree here, we want to get this jewel socket up here and this one down here. And then this is like a nice little additional, I just picked these up my last 4 points. This is just more energy shield. We don't get any benefit from the increased armor. But it's a nice energy shield. We get out to this little notable here for 20%. It's great. So, yep, that's the passive tree. All right, now let's check out our gems. As we look at the skill gems, I just want to mention that I've placed the supports in order of importance. All right, now first off, our demon form. On our demon form, all we are using is second wind. This gives our form a second charge. With this, we should be able to permanently stay in our demon form. A side note here is that if you were to ever fall out of your form and not have a charge available, you can teleport back to town and it will reset your charges to 2. Next up is our Infernal Hound. All of our supports here are meant to make our Hound as tanky as possible so it can absorb as much of the damage we are taking as possible. So we are using Last Gasp, Elemental Army, Meat Shield, the only offensive support, which is Culling Strike, and Minion Mastery. Alright, next is Hexblast. Hexblast is our main ability, and as you clear maps, other than pressing your mana flask, this is basically all you're going to use. A quick note on Hexblast before we look at its supports, this ability uses a ton of mana, so you'll want to take your character's mana into account when determining what level of Hexblast to use. The higher the level, the more mana it will cost. Also remember that when you go into demon form, you get +6 to spell levels, and that'll make it cost significantly more mana. Alright, now on to the supports. We'll use Inspiration to reduce our mana cost, Arcane Surge for more cast speed and mana regen, Controlled Destruction for more damage, Arcane Tempo for more cast speed, and Chaos Mastery for more damage. Only use this though if your mana can handle it. Alright, now let's talk about Contagion. Contagion is how we freeze things with this build. we'll use the Chaotic Freeze support. This makes it so that anything with the contagion on it will gain freeze buildup when it is hit by our Hexblast. The more Demon Flame stacks we have, the more damage our Hexblast does, therefore the more freeze buildup it will do as well. Additionally, we'll use Hinder and Encumbrance for some added utility. Alright, and now for Eye of Winter. We really only use this for bosses. Versus a boss, you will want to Contagion, Eye of Winter, Hexblast spam. So we're using Withering Touch so that the projectiles of the spell will apply Wither. This is because our rings give us extra chaos damage, allowing this to work with Eye of Winter. Then we'll use Unleash so that we'll send out 3 of these at a time, making our Wither stack to max instantly. And finally, Persistence to make our Wither stacks last longer. Alright, next let's talk about our Spirit Gems. First off, Blasphemy. Blasphemy is what allows us to spam Hexblast because it is consistently keeping everything around us cursed with Despair. The more area of effect you have, the further away from your character the skill will curse things. We use 2 supports on Blasphemy, the first one being Despair, and the second one is Magnified Effect to increase its AoE. Now let's talk about Grim Feast. It's absolutely insane and basically doubles your energy shield pool. With this aura equipped, as long as you are one-shotting everything with your Hexblast and not getting hit, you'll just be walking around the map with a comfy 10k energy shield. We support Grim Feast with Cannibalism. This can be super helpful at keeping you in your form when you're clearing something like a breach and are close to crashing out due to having too many Demon Flame stacks. And the other support we use here is Clarity for more mana regen. And finally, our last Spirit Gem is Arctic Armor. This is yet another defensive layer we have. When you're hit by a melee attack, it will consume a stack of this spell to deal cold damage to the attacker. It's quite funny because when you have a lot of Demon Flame stacks and you get hit by a melee, sometimes this ability will just kill whatever it was that hit you. Supporting it, we use things to increase its damage and freeze buildup. Cold Mastery, Glaciation, and Deep Freeze. Alright, now for a few tips and a couple bugs that I know about. First off, when you're going through the campaign, do not kill the candle boss in Act 1 or Act 1 Cruel, as doing so will increase your maximum HP. If your character has already killed this boss once or even both times, don't worry, it doesn't completely brick the build. It'll just make it so you have to invest a little bit more currency than you would have to if you had skipped the boss both times. Next up is to always go into demon form before going through the portal to get into your map. This way, if there are a bunch of monsters right on the other side, you can stay completely still using the duration of the invulnerability you get upon entering the map to stack up your Demon Flame stacks. Alright, and now my last tip is that if you lose your form and you don't have any stacks left to get back into it, you can portal back to base and it will give you both your stacks back. Alright, now there's 2 bugs that I've encountered while playing this build. First off, Demon Form builds cannot complete the Trial of Sekimus. On the final floor and during the boss fight as well, the mechanics that teleport your character will just straight up crash your game, and it will send you back to the start. Hopefully GGG will fix this soon. The second bug I know about is that sometimes when you're going out and then back into your form too fast, the demon form will permanently T-pose and will start lagging all over your screen when you try to move. Just shift out and back in one more time and that'll fix it. Thanks so much for watching my first build guide. I tried to be thorough, but if I missed anything or if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments and I'll answer as many as I can. This definitely took some time and effort to put together, so if you found it helpful, then I'd really appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up and like the video. And as always, make sure to subscribe as well so you don't miss out on what I'm cooking up next. Peace.